Hello, my name is Eric Nantz, and I am one of the curators for the RWeekly organization. And this is a group entirely made of volunteers to help curate the top stories and resources, shared learning, updated packages, and many more that are from the R community and by the R community. And for this screencast, we thought it'd be really interesting to give you an inside look at the curation process if you would be interested in joining us to become a curator for RWeekly. And we'll be sure to put links to relevant resources in the episode description that you'll see below the video. So let's go ahead and get started. As you see on the web page here, this is the home site for RWeekly. And you can see that our latest issue is called 2020-22, which was curated by my good friend Jonathan Carroll, and now it is my turn. So I figured let's see what it's like behind the scenes to do this. So when you're a curator, you have some excellent resources available. For instance, on our GitHub page, which is of course at github.com/rweekly, we have a very nice wiki section which defines a couple of very important resources for you. First of which is the release editor FAQ, which kind of gives you a step-by-step guidance on the release process. And this, in essence, this video is walking you through kind of an interactive demonstration of those steps, along with some of my advice going forward. And also we'll be leveraging an innovative tool made by Wolfram Kin, who is the founder of RWeekly, called the Team Space Guide, and we'll be able to show you that tool interactively. So for the first part I want to mention is that we get submissions to RWeekly through a variety of services. Some people will go ahead and utilize the submit feature within the website directly, and that's excellent. And others will submit a pull request to the current draft of the next issue. So let's go ahead and take a look at some of those now. At the time of I'm recording this, there are two pull requests regarding updating our draft for the next issue. And we can go ahead and take a look at these. And this is what our curators will do when they're assigned to that issue. They'll take a look at the links that were submitted. You can see here the submitters saying they've added a tutorial. And we see via the GitHub interface what is the link. Looks like a decent resource. I have checked it beforehand, and I think this looks like something we can go ahead and merge in. So I am going to go ahead and merge the pull request now. And we'll just confirm the merge. Let GitHub do its thing. And I will make a short little thank you comment. And now we have that pull request merge. So now we can go back to the remaining ones. And we have another one that was opened earlier today as of this recording. And now, as you may have guessed, yes, we have a great resource available. But because I merged the request beforehand, we might have to deal with a merge conflict here. Now, in this case, I am going to go ahead and use the feature within GitHub to resolve this conflict. This doesn't always happen, but sometimes it does. And that's where, recently GitHub has added this nice feature where you can polish this yourself. So we're going to go ahead and, if you're familiar with GitHub, you've probably seen something like this before. We're just simply going to put these resources in like this. I think this looks good. I don't see any other errors in the file. So we're going to mark that as resolved. Commit the merge. And this will commit the GH pages, which is, of course, the branch that the website is based on and that you would be interacting with most of the time as a curator. So now the merge conflict is resolved. We're going to go ahead and confirm the merge. And we are ready to go. And I'm going to say thank you again. And now we have our draft updated. Now, one thing that you may notice from time to time is we might get submissions that don't quite fit the criteria that we're looking for. Maybe they're not related to R. Maybe they're trying to do some advertising without really being obvious about it. So you might see some instances where we have to close a pull request. So my good friend and colleague, Miles Salmon, was helping me with showing you an example of what that might look like, where she had submitted a Python link. And of course, with no disrespect to Python, but RWeekly is not a Python curated effort. So this would be a case where we would politely reject this pull request, and we would, in some instances, we would contact the submitter and say, thank you for the submission, but this doesn't quite fit our criteria, so that they have an update. But you can see we have already closed this a couple of days ago. So as a curator, you might see these things from time to time. So now we have our draft updated, and we can even verify within GitHub itself. We can look at the draft.md file, which now we see those additional tutorials have been added here. And we can also actually see this on the website as well. If we go to draft, you can see actually it's not refreshed yet, which we're going to get to in a little bit. So sometimes there will be a little lag. But now let's talk about, we have now kind of gotten our pull request merged in. What is the next step? So I am going to share with you the fact that we can get these links from a variety of sources, and some of it is individualized to the curator and how they like to obtain sources of content. For myself personally, I am, as those of you may know me from my other endeavors, a very enthusiastic member of the R community, and I often try to keep track of these links that I find from time to time. One service that I like to use is something called Pinboard. This is basically an online bookmarking service, and I'm not trying to do any free advertising for this, but this is just a practical tool that I use to collect links that I can share across my devices. And when it's my turn for curation, I save these links from things that I find, through the community, and I save them to this service so I can be reminded to maybe add them to the draft if they haven't been added in a previous issue. So you can see here I found two links to, looks like, some new packages. One dealing with, looks like tidy draws, and another for integrating with Instagram data. And where I might find these links is, honestly, I tend to visit the RStats hashtag on Twitter. This is actually, once you sift through there's a little noise here and there, but when you sift through that, you often find a lot of insightful links that you might not find in the traditional sources. So a lot of times I'll find some interesting posts or links to packages from my kind of curation. Maybe every night I'll look at this for a bit and I'll find some nice resources there. So now we can talk about, going back to our release editor FAQ, we need to now aggregate some additional materials to additional links to the draft, and that we can use this RWeekly Team Space tool. So if you join the RWeekly group, you would get a customized login to the RWeekly Space Team Space, and you can see that right here. So we can see that it has two sections here. It has a draft section and a submit section. And so the draft section is basically a collection of new links from people that have previously submitted their sites, say their site's feed for our content, typically an RSS feed. And this is kind of like an automated system that will aggregate these new links for the range that you specify in terms of the dates. So I am using the date range of May 31st of this recording to June 5th. And I'm going to go ahead and refresh that just in case there are things I didn't see. And now we can see that we have a set of markdown links right here, which are, again, have been aggregated from the existing sites that have been submitted to RWeekly for new content. And so what I would do is then I would start copy and paste this into the draft file, which we'll do in a little short order here. And then, like I said, there is another section called submit, where these are from the users that have used the submit portion of the RWeekly website to submit their content. And so again, this is aggregating all those posts. And one thing to note is that as of this moment, it will show some posts that are technically outside or previous to my curation window. So I may not include everything in this list, but I'll certainly be looking at all of it to make sure which one fits kind of the range that I'm looking for. And of course, making sure that it's the right kind of content. So this is again, very intuitive, easy to use. And I'm so thankful that our Wolfram has set this up for us. So now let's turn our attention to actually updating our draft. So for that, I'm going to turn over to Visual Studio Code, which I'm going to use for kind of the code demonstrations of this. And actually, I do need to refresh my draft file because this clone of the GitHub repository is not quite up to date locally. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that content outside of this. And now I should have an updated draft right here. And you can see this is, of course, our Markdown format. And now you can see those are the 4 links that we saw previously on the website for the tutorial section. And so now at this point, I would start taking those links that I found, again, through either my curation of, say, my collected bookmarks and through the Team Space Guide, and I would paste them right here. So, and then the important thing to consider is that we break down these stories by different categories. And to get a description of those categories, we can take a look. Let's see where I put that link here. Yeah, so this is from our wiki on GitHub, and we'll have a link to everything in the show notes, but this is a good little recap. Actually, I should show you on the screen. Sorry for that. There we go. So this is going back to the website, and you can see that this has a nice breakdown of the relevant material for the different sections. So we won't read this verbatim here, but this is what I would use to start figuring out the best place where these different links can go. And what's nice is that sometimes you might not always have the right answer, or at least you think you know the right category it should belong in. But as I mentioned, this is a community effort with the curator group, and we have a Slack channel that I'll be showing in a little bit, where you are welcome to communicate with all of us to get our feedback or our opinions on some questions that you might have about your curation through the issue. So since this is a screencast, I'm not going to belabor you with watching me go through the process of visiting each of those links and figuring out the categories. So through the magic of editing and automation, I'm going to go ahead and speed through that process, and we'll show you what the new version of the draft looks like. So let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And now you can see I've started to populate this a lot more. And just to make sure things are looking good, we're going to open our Markdown preview to the side of it, which is a nice feature of Visual Studio Code. And now you can see that I have added a little text at the beginning saying that this was curated by me. You don't have to do that. I just like to let the readers know who was part of this issue. And then you can see now this is at the time of this recording how I thought the links that we were assembling would be part of this draft. And you will see something that you didn't necessarily see in the team spaces is all these different packages that are part of this curation. So we'll go back to this. Let's talk about a nice little feature that our fellow curators have assembled for us is a couple scripts to help, based on our course, to help with some of these other links that we can put in here. And so for that, I'm going to temporarily, first I need to save my changes, of course. So let's go ahead and save that. And then since this is a course based in Git, I'm going to go ahead and commit my changes here. So I'm going to go ahead in my Git tab, add my draft, update draft during my screencast. We will check that. And then I'm actually going to go ahead and push this now because I'm going to need this in a little bit. So let's go ahead and push now. Oh, I forgot that Visual Studio Code does not play nicely with my setup for pushing this. So I'm going to go ahead and do that in a separate terminal. Bear with me here. Okay, I think I have it pushed now. So we're going to go ahead and verify that it was pushed on the GitHub repository. So let's go ahead and switch to our GitHub repo. Update draft during my screencast, and let's open the draft here. And sure enough, we have all those links that I've assembled. So we'll go back to this in a little bit, but I want to show you something really cool that I mentioned about aggregating those packages. So I am going to temporarily do a little change over here behind the scenes. Bear with me for a second. Check out. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go to the file panes here. And I have, we have a folder called scripts within the main repository. And it has a couple interesting things that we've worked on. So the first one I'm going to show you is a nice little script that interfaces with the Cranberries website, which is, for those that aren't aware, this is kind of like an aggregation of all the new and updated packages to the CRAN network that was put together by Dirk at Ubuntu from the R community and the R Foundation. And so what we wanted to do is find a way to kind of capture those updates so that we could put links to those packages that have either been updated or are brand new as relevant to our weekly issue. So Jonathan Carroll did a first draft of this where it was basically you would copy some text from the Cranberry site and then run it into a simple function to get the markdown syntax of the links. So I thought, you know, let's try taking it a step further, shall we? We're using R, of course, and we're all fans of R. So I utilized a few different packages to basically grab the RSS feed of Cranberries, do some kind of tidy manipulation and string processing, and we'll have a link to this in the description as well, to be able to grab kind of a tidy data frame of everything. So we'll go ahead and get our terminal going here. Working on my keyboard shortcuts, as you can imagine. So let's go ahead and get my focus back on the screen here. Let's run all this. This will take a couple seconds to get the feed data, and then once that completes, I will first show you how we can simply get the printed kind of markdown syntax of these links. We'll go ahead and run that. And you can see here, I won't belabor all this, but we had a lot of new packages submitted in this week. I was almost shocked by how many, but you know, R is popular, right? So we can do the same thing with the updated packages. We have a little helper function for that. Sorry for the scrolling here. We are working on that. And then once that finishes, we will have some new output to look at. So I'll go ahead and run that. And now we have some more links that are now in the markdown format. And this is a syntax that we typically use in our curation issue for these two different sections. So what I had done is I'd ran this a little bit before the screencast, and I copied this markdown text into that draft that we had just submitted. And we also have some great additional scripts as well, one of which is find duplicates, which is very helpful that if you have worked on your draft, but you're wondering if any of the links that you either took from the pull request or maybe you had added in your own curation, maybe you're worried that it might be a duplicate of something that's already been posted like a week ago or longer. This script will basically run through your draft and find if there were any duplicates. So this is, again, a very nice thing to keep us using some automation to make sure that we didn't make any errors in duplicating some links to content. So that kind of covers what you do to update the draft. Now let's go ahead and go back to the browser here. And we're going to go ahead and update the cache here. We have to update the cache in a couple different places. So going back to the RWeekly site, we have this draft link right here. Actually, oh, look at that. It's already updated on its own. That's great. It's becoming very efficient. So the next thing that we want to cover is the fact that in the RWeekly, kind of the method that we use for curation, once the curator has completed their draft, which is typically the next step, is to let the fellow curators kind of vote on the stories that they feel should be what they call in the highlights section, which, if we go back to the main site, is typically the top three stories or updates from the community that think deserve special treatment to be mentioned at the top. So now I'm going to show you how we do that voting process. So let's go back to the team spaces, and we don't have to do anything else here, but we have a nice link to something called Highlight. And what Highlight is that this is actually an interactive Shiny application that has been made by Wolfram to let us generate this poll that we're going to run in the RWeekly Slack channel for highlights. Now, the way the process works is that the curator, in this case me, is going to pick the 10, in my opinion, the 10 most important topics to vote on. And then from that, the rest of the curator group is going to take a look at these and vote for what their top 3 are. Not in any particular order, but whatever 3 they think should be belonging into that section. Now, this is always sometimes a really tough choice for someone like me personally, because I see a lot of interesting updates here in their new packages or new content. This is always it's always sometimes tough to find to narrow this down. So I'm gonna interactively pick some that I've looked at ahead of time that I think are really interesting. So we may edit. I may speed this up a little bit, but let's see how fast I can do this. Saw these interesting posts here. Certainly, we had some big updates that we've seen in the community with packages. So I'm going ahead and click some of these. So how many do I have? I have 8 selected, so I need 2 more. Again, tough choices, right? Looking at some of these here. Let's see. This was an interesting one. I read that beforehand. And I think I will look at some of this, admittedly, is kind of personal. So again, there's no really right or wrong answer. But I'm intrigued by something that's been going on with that package. So here we are. So now we have our text that we're going to put into the highlight poll. So all we need to do is copy paste this. I'm going to copy that. Now I'm going to switch over to another view in the screencast where I can show you where we put this in the Slack channel. So on the right side, you see, I should say the left side, you are seeing the highlight channel. And so we have multiple channels. We won't get into too much detail right now, but in the highlight channel, this is where you can see Jonathan Carroll put in the last version of the poll. I'm going to simply paste in what I copied here. And I believe that should cover it. Let's give it a whirl. And I think we have it. Yep, we do. So just make sure. Yep. I may have just did it twice accidentally. We'll see. That's the joys of doing this during a screencast. But now let me just zoom out of this. Not sure how to get rid of that box. That's another story, but the poll is here. So now my fellow curators are going to go into here. Let me delete this out. Maybe that's okay. There we go. So my curators are going to go here. I'm going to type a quick message. We have a lot of great links to choose from this week. And this is being recorded right now. I'm just having a little fun with this. We're definitely a friendly bunch in the RWeekly group, so I'm going to submit that. So now we have the highlight poll ready to go. So at this point, this is the portion where we're going to obviously let, during the weekend, my fellow curators weigh in on what they want the highlights to be. But there is still some more steps that we need to look at in terms of preparing our draft. If you're familiar with RWeekly, you have seen that in our issues, we like to intersperse, some visuals, especially for the links or resources that are doing some nice visualization or some kind of image that conveys the story here, like you see in Jonathan's recent issue. So how do you go about making this possible? So we'll go back to the release editor FAQ and we'll go to this step about adding images. So certainly you don't need to do this for every post. And some posts simply won't have images. So you might look at some of the links and you might see some and pick a few. There's no set number to it. And what we recommend is that instead of posting the image into the main repo where the draft is, there is actually a separate repository that's been set up just for these images, which is done, as you can see in the text here, to avoid making the size of our main repository too large. And that repo is right here. It's called RWeekly image. And this is where we have kind of separate subdirectories, either based on the current issue that the curator is putting together. And so we have up to, there's no real strict structure to this, but most of the time we'll do a folder within this particular repo corresponding to the date of our issue being released. So I have gone ahead and looked at least one of the stories to find an image so I can show you in the screencast how we post an image. One of the links that I had submitted was this link about outstanding user interfaces with Shiny, which is a new book that's being written by David Grandin. And I thought, well, there's a nice image of a Shiny app, or looks like a Shiny dashboard. Why not take this? So the process is you would simply find a way to save the image from this page to your local computer as, say, a PNG or JPEG, whatever the image is. And if it is quite a large image, we do recommend you compress it a bit to save on the width that it takes in the rendered web page. But let's say that I've saved this particular image right here to my local system, and now I want to upload it to this image repo. So once I do, the easiest way to do that is to scroll up here and let's go to upload files. There's certainly more than one way to do this, but this was the easiest approach for me. But actually, before we do that, you can see that this would be going into the main root of the repository, and I don't necessarily want to do that. I want to create the folder right now, and I'm going to do a little trick that I like, but you don't have to do it this way. I'm going to create a new file, but I'm going to put it into a subdirectory, and I call this .getKeep. You don't have to call it this. This is just a simple way, initialize folder for 2020 608. We'll go ahead and commit that. And so now, if we go back, now we have this folder right here. And now we can go ahead and upload files. So I have downloaded that file ahead of time. So I'm just going to go ahead and choose that. You won't see it on your screen. I'm going to choose that real quick from my home directory. Bear with me a second while I find that. Okay. This was the verbatim name of the image. Add dashboard image. Commit that. Depending on the size of the image, it might take a little bit, but should be there. And to verify, let's go ahead and go to my folder. And here it is. So it's going to look big on this render, but it should not be too bad. And if I need to compress it more, I will later on. But now the key is, okay, how do we get this image directly into the draft that we just looked at? So we will go ahead and go back to VS Code in a little bit. But let me first click this image again. And what I want is kind of the link to this raw image. Now, I kind of cheat a little bit when I do this. I simply copy one of these links from before and simply kind of modify it as appropriate. So let's go ahead and go back to Visual Studio Code. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, so I'm going to open up the draft file again. We don't need a terminal this time, so we'll close that. So I'm going to scroll to where I'd put the, there it is, the outstanding user interfaces with Shiny. And I'm going to now start putting in the link to the image. In Mark, there are multiple ways to do this. I know Markdown pretty well, so I'm just going to type it myself. I'm going to say Shiny image. Could be anything you want in this part of the field. And now this is where I need to put that text or the hyperlink to the image. And again, I'm kind of lazy for this, but what I do is I often go back to a previous post. We'll go back to Jonathan's post from last week, and I'll simply find one of these and copy the format of it. Again, it's kind of crude in my opinion, but I just want to do something that I know is a tried and true method. So I'm just simply going to change the link here, and then I need to verify what that file image was called. Looking at my other screen, bs4-fresh. I'm going to save that. And now, I'm not sure if this will work in Visual Studio Code, but let's give it a shot. Oh, there it goes. There it is. There's our image. It's rendered correctly. The link is showing up. So we are good to go there. But you would repeat this process for the additional stories that you think have a nice image or graph or whatever have you, and intersperse that throughout the different sections. So we are now pretty well set to go in terms of other than making them more images into the issue. This is the part where I would wait again for the rest of my talented curators to view or to vote on the stories that I put into the highlight channel. And then once I get those stories that make the top 3, we'll call it, it's fairly straightforward to finalize your release. So I'm going to walk you through what that looks like without actually doing it yet, since we don't have those stories yet. But what you would do is you would simply, once the poll is finalized, find the links that correspond to that story in your draft, and you would simply copy them into the highlights. And I'm not saying these would make the highlights, but just for the sake of demonstration, it would be as simple as, say, maybe being these 3 links. And then the next step is then to save this as a new file that is going to go into the posts directory, because it will not be a draft anymore. It's going to be the actual issue for that week. So the easiest way to do that is I simply do a file save as. Now, because technically I'm in a Linux container right now, so it won't look quite the same as it would if you were doing this on your PC. But I'm going to have to kind of hard code type this because I did not plan for working at this interface. But the post directory is with _posts. And then the naming convention of the issue goes like this. It goes by the year, goes by the month, that's 6. And then this will be, let me double check though. I'm going to go ahead and scroll to the bottom of these. And yeah, so it is the leading 0. I tend to mix that up a lot. 06, and then this will be 08 because the last one was 01. And then we also have like a naming convention for the issue number. It goes by year and then the number in the sequence. So it's 23 in this case. .md. This looks good. Let's go ahead and save that. And now this is in our post section. But we have to do a couple minor things before we push this up. Is we need to take out the layout, the YAML header, because this is not a draft anymore. This is now an actual post. So we can go ahead and remove this. And then for the title, I can show you, again, going back to the previous issue. We'll close our preview for a second. We give it a title that looks like this. We would say RWeekly 2020 and 23. And then we kind of summarize each of the 3 highlights by a simple phrase or, a couple words for each of them. And so what I would do is I would simply copy, or not copy here from directly, but I would use this as inspiration to name those 3 highlighted stories. Then once we have that finalized, it's at that point simply a matter of pushing this change, this new file, to the main GitHub repository. And then once you have that, then you are all set for the post to be going live. And ideally, it'll go cache fairly quickly. But what I recommend, if we go back to the browser for a second, I recommend that you go to the team spaces again, and you do an update cache, assuring that this is the link, rweekly.org. You would update the cache, and that should get everything launched and ready to go. Most of the time, this is a flawless procedure, but if you find there are some issues, as I mentioned, we have a very welcoming group of curators, and we'll all be happy to help out if you encounter any difficulties updating the issue. So that was a lot of information. I kind of boiled down almost a week's worth of work into what maybe is about 20 minutes or 30 minutes. I forgot how long this is going. But I hope that you've been able to see kind of the curation process, the resources that we have available. Again, everything is based on the home site of rweekly.org, links to, for more information there, and the GitHub repository, which all of the files are going to, and the wiki page where you can get to the team space guide. And then this is, again, kind of like some links to how to join, everything like that. We'll have all this into the episode description below. So thank you so much for listening. I know it's been a little lengthy, but I hope it was a good way to kind of see behind the instructions and behind kind of what you see as a finished product, what goes into these issues that we release every week. And so my sincere thanks to my fellow curators. They have been so welcoming to me as I've been part of this group for about over a year now. And like I said, we are looking for more. And if you would like to join us, feel free to reach out to us by clicking this link that we'll have, like I said, into the episode description for joining our group and applying to join. So thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the next and future issues of RWeekly. Talk to you soon.